What's going on, everybody? This is Scott, also known as ChaChingKing, and if you are new to eBay, you probably have a ton of questions. We're going to break down the most common questions that I see. One of the first questions I get is, do I have to have a store in order to sell on eBay? And the short answer to that is no. If you have an eBay account that you've been buying on, you can absolutely just sell on that one too. The question gets more complicated when you start thinking you're going to run it for a business. As of right now, you don't need to do anything else for eBay other than just sell. There are some advantages to having a store depending upon the level that you get, but you do not have to have one in order to get started. All right, the second question, and I see this everywhere. What should I sell? How can you source? What are the things that I can sell? The first thing that I would recommend that you start with those things that you already have. If you are new to reselling, you want to make sure that you keep your costs as low as possible. And you do that by starting with things around the house that you already have. Where you go from there will truly depend on what kind of business you're trying to build. You might be a college student who isn't looking for something that takes 40 to 60 hours a week. You might be retired like we are. But there's a lot of people that are also like, hey, I want to eventually replace my full-time income. And if that were the case, you might want to sell replenishable things, things that you can go out and buy and sell and then sell again. So you're not recreating listings. That's a little bit easier to scale. Well, that's not true. It's a lot easier to scale if you're running that kind of business. Third question, how do I know how much to charge? I see variations of that question almost every day. I'm going to tell you what we do and what I recommend that you do. A lot of people will ask if I buy something for this amount, how many times that money do I need to charge? Like if I pay 5, do I charge 20? Well, what you paid has absolutely nothing to do with what it will sell for. So what I recommend, and what most people that are doing the videos, most people that have some experience, what they recommend is that you get onto the eBay app. And I would want you to do a search for that item and take a look at how many listings there are of it. And then I want you to sort it by sold listings. Take a look at how many have sold, but the sold listings for the same item that you have will give you a much better indication of what people are actually paying for the item. How much you charge isn't based on what you paid, it's just based on what the item sells for, and you can find that by looking at the sold comps on eBay. Question number 4, what is the best shipping method? I'm going to break it down into a very, very safe way. Safe meaning that you're not going to get terribly burned on what it costs you versus what the customer paid. And then we'll talk about the flat rate shipping methods. The safest ways to ship financially is to use calculated or the United States Post Office priority flat rate materials. Calculated is as simple as this. You take your item and you pack it just like you're going to ship it, and then you weigh it and take your measurements and you put that in your listing. Then when that item sells, eBay takes the accurate weight and measurement that you've put in there, and it determines how much to charge the buyer based on where you're at and where they're at, how far it's going. The other way is the post office's priority flat rate materials. And keep in mind, there are some post office priority materials that are not flat rate, but we're talking like the padded flat rate envelope, the flat rate medium box, and the large flat rate box. Those are going to cost you about the same amount of money regardless of where they're going. So I know that if I've got a heavier pair of jeans that will fit inside the padded flat rate, it's going to cost me around that $9 mark for me to ship that. And I can charge $9 and it's always going to be pretty close. If you're just starting out, one of those two methods is very safe. As you become more comfortable with what it's going to cost, you can use like the post office's ground advantage, and you'll have a pretty good idea of how much you can charge. And you know that you're going to be very, very close to what it actually cost. I have covered the 5th question in whole videos before, but I don't need to. I can tell you the answer very, very quickly. The question is, what supplies do I need to get started? And I'm going to just tell you right now, you don't need much. Like most people on YouTube, I've got a list of supplies in my description that you can click on, but you don't need much. You're going to need some tape. You're going to need some shipping materials, either your own or the post office's, and you're going to need a scale so that you can weigh things, and you need a printer. A printer really does make things better. You can start with just an inkjet and cut your labels out and tape them down. The first big expense you'll have is upgrading. I don't know if that shows. You're going to eventually want to upgrade to a label printer, but you don't have to start with that. You probably have most everything you need to ship. Think about it like this. If you were going to send something to your brother or your sister and you're like, I got to ship something off to them for their birthday, you'd pack it up and you'd ship it. And you probably wouldn't be very worried about it. The only difference is here is it's not going to somebody you know, and you're going to pay through it through eBay. You don't have to wait in the post office. You get your label on it, you get to drop it off. So what do you need? You need very little. You need to be able to put stuff in a box or an envelope, tape it up, and put a label on it and ship it. So don't buy a bunch of supplies thinking that you're going to have all of them, because the reality of it is you don't have to have a bunch to start, and you can add what you need as you go. How do I handle returns? That's got to be one of the scariest things when we're working as a new reseller, because it makes your heart sink. It fills you with angst. It fills you with worry. You can click no returns. You can set up a policy that says no returns. But I'm going to tell you why I think your policy should say that you accept returns. You need to have a policy that says whether or not you accept returns, and then for how long you accept returns, and who pays for that return label. Here's what I have. I do accept returns. I have a 30-day return policy, and the buyer pays the return. The reason that I say that you should have a return policy that says you will accept them is because if you say no returns and the buyer is willing to lie, if they're willing to say,
oh, it wasn't packaged right, didn't look like I thought it would, the color wasn't right,
they get a return anyway. So if you say no returns, the only people you're really blocking are those people who are not willing to lie. So I accept returns. My return rate is less than 2%. You have to make it fit you. eBay would love for you to do free returns. I don't like it, so I don't do it. But you choose what's best for you. That's what we do. All right, let's talk about fees real quick. I get this question a lot. How much are the fees on eBay? And if it's not a question, you get a lot of people that talk about how horrible the fees on eBay are. So let's talk about what they are and exactly what are they charging for. Typically, eBay fees are somewhere between 13 and 15%. They do vary a little bit depending upon the category that your item's sold in, but 13 to 15%. My family had a business. I couldn't touch those kind of percentages with a brick and mortar store. So for me, this is still one of the most reasonable platforms out there. It's going to run you somewhere 13 to 15%. What is feedback? What does it do? Is it worthwhile? So let's talk about feedback for a minute, because there's two types of feedback. You've got feedback as a buyer, and you've got feedback as a seller. Now, as far as your number of feedback that you have on your account, eBay doesn't distinguish between the two. How you earn feedback varies a great deal. As a buyer, you can only get positive feedback. Nobody can leave you a negative comment, and they can't leave you a negative feedback score for any reason. So as a buyer, to me, that number doesn't mean a whole lot. As a seller, a buyer could leave you negative feedback. They could leave you neutral feedback. And of course, they can leave you positive feedback. When you are just beginning, if you do not have a high feedback score, feedback rating is very, very important, because percentage-wise, one negative feedback would have a big, big impact on your overall score. So you need to do your best to take care of that number. Once you have earned a lot of feedback, each individual one becomes less important, but the customer service doesn't become less important. You still need to take care of every single person that you can. It's just that if you have a lot of feedback and you get a negative that you couldn't take care of somebody, it's not going to have a big impact on you. And the reality of it is, most people are going to leave you positive feedback. Most people, they just want to buy your stuff. And if you're being honest as you can be about what you have, and you ship it on time and you get it to them, most people are going to be happy with it. And even if they're not, and you were to get a return, the vast majority of people that return something don't leave a negative. So the reality of it is, it's important, but it isn't worth losing any sleep over. For the people that it doesn't bother at all, they're probably the ones approaching it right. Your customer service is more important than the feedback. And if your customer service is good, your feedback's probably going to take care of itself. Should I list my item as a buy it now or as an auction? Listed as a buy it now. That should be the end of the question. Very rarely would I recommend that you run an auction. Very rarely. Here is when you run an auction. Every other time you need to do a buy it now. Let's say for an auction, I know that it is highly sought after. Everybody and their brother is looking for this item. I have no competition. Nobody else has one. I've got the only one. I also know the floor is this high. If I already know that I've got something really in demand and I have the only one and all of them sell for $500, I'm going to list it as a buy it now for $500. But if I have one that super in demand, nobody else has one, and I'm positive I'd get 500, but I don't know that on a different day I might get 2,000, I would run an auction on that item. All others, buy it now. Run buy it now. If you want to create a little bit more opportunity, do buy it now and turn on best offer so that people can send you an offer. And that's actually what I have on 99% of the items in my store is I have a buy it now with best offer turned on. What do I need to do to take pictures? And quite frankly, modern phones, a modern smartphone will take perfectly good pictures for you to use on eBay. Here's what you really need. More than pretty photos, you need accurate photos, good lighting, and clear pictures. You want to show the whole item and you want to show the flaws up close and personal. The main thing you want to get out of your photos is that the person that buys your item, there aren't any surprises, that they get exactly what it looked like. Nice, clear photographs without cluttered backgrounds, and that is really all you need to do. How do I keep my inventory organized? Melody and I use the plastic tubs, and we use, I'm going to call it something fancy, an alphanumeric system, A1, A2, B1, B2, and then I will put that in the SKU. So when I list and I've got it all ready to go, I've made my listing, in the SKU on my listing, I would put A1. So I know that if this sells, it'll say, oh, that's in A1 and I can go pull it. That's all I do. I know there are people with way more complicated systems that their system may provide them with other information that they need for their business. This is the way we have done it since the first day that I couldn't find something. More importantly than using my system for storing your inventory, use a system for storing your inventory, and do not wait until you need it. Make sure that in that SKU on your listing, it says exactly where that item is so that when it sells, you can go get it. What's the biggest mistake that people that are new to reselling make? And for me, this one's easy, and it is that analysis paralysis. They look and they think and they ask questions and they watch YouTube videos and they buy stuff. And then they start that whole process over when they're not actually listing anything. The biggest mistake that new resellers make and is not getting started. So if you're asking yourself and your biggest fear is that like, what am I missing? What am I missing? You're probably missing a little bit of experience that you can solve by listing a few items, selling a few items, and shipping a few items. 13, what are comps? I mentioned it earlier that I said, here's what we got to do. We got to look up some comps. One of the things that you run into with all of these questions is that you're going to see people using language that we're all used to that maybe a new viewer might not know what they are. Comps is a good example of it. Comps is short for comparables. When I'm looking at selling something, what are comparables to my item that have sold? And we do that on eBay by looking up the item. We want to look and see what did they sell for. That gives me my comps. That tells me how much is that item selling for. So when you hear the word comps, that's what that's referring to. What is average sale price, or ASP? One of the dangers we have on comps is that we'll go and we'll look and we'll see what things sold for, and our eye is attracted to the one that sold for 500 and not the ones that are selling for 50. And we're like, wow, this sells for as much as $500. When what you really need to know is what's the average sell price. If you've got an average item, you need to know what the average sell price is. And this isn't terribly complicated. And honestly, I don't overthink it. I just want an idea of how much they sold for on average. And it's as simple as adding them all up and dividing. And that's kind of what I do. I am not breaking out a calculator for mine. I'm looking at it and I'm getting an idea of what the average sale price is. That's the way that I do it, and it's served us really, really well without being overly complicated. What is sell-through rate? There's a bunch of different ways to break this down. I don't do it scientifically because I'm not trying to decide anything on a scientific basis. I just want to know how fast is this item going to sell. And that's what sell-through rate tells me. How fast is this going to sell? So again, if I'm going to list this phone and I'm going to go back to my eBay search and I'm going to put in to the eBay search engine what I have for sale. And if I pull it up and there's 100 of them, now I want to sort by sold. And when I bring up the sold comps, the sold items, and I look and see there's 75 of them sold, for me, that's a 75% sell-through rate. There's going to be some math people are like, well, that's not exactly accurate. I get it. I'm not worried about that. I need an idea of how fast this is going to sell. Let's say that there's 100 listed and the average sale price is $100, but there's one sold for $100. For me, that 1% sell-through rate is probably not an item I'm going to be very interested in picking up, because I'm going to be sitting on that for a long, long time. Not always, but for me, it's just an indicator. It's one tool in that box to figure out whether or not it's a good item for me. If there's 100 listed and 500 sold, then that becomes really, really impressive. That's a 500% sell-through rate. Those items are going to sell very, very quickly. If I've got a good listing with good pictures and an attractive price, mine's going to sell quick. Sell-through rate is very, very important as part of the tools that you're going to use to determine whether or not to buy something and exactly how you want to list it. What do I do with items that don't sell? And there are as many answers to this question as there are sellers. Let me tell you what we do. When I say an item that doesn't sell, the first thing I go and I take a look at my listing. Have I made a mistake that has kept people from looking at my item or buying my item? Several ways to improve your listing: improve the pictures, improve the price, improve the shipping, improve the description, whichever one it needs, or all of them. I might do that. Sometimes you're going to find out you've got items that not only have they not sold, they're not going to sell. It's just not stuff that maybe it doesn't fit my store anymore. Maybe it's just not stuff people are chasing anymore. So listen, what Melody and I do with those, and it was hard to do at first, we get rid of that stuff. We find people who need it or other people who will benefit from it, even if they're going to sell it. I don't care. We give that stuff away. Number one, improve my listing, get it sold, and if that's not going to work, we get it to somebody who it'll benefit. What do I do when the buyer doesn't pay for the item? This has actually gotten better in the last couple of years. If you talk to any experienced resellers, all of us have just loathed somebody buying our item and they never pay for it, and then my item is just tied up until they either decide they're going to do it or they're not going to do it, and there's seemingly no penalty for the buyer to keep repeating that. That has improved. Most of the time now, eBay is requiring that buyer to pay for their items. It still comes up occasionally that somebody doesn't pay for something. Two things are happening, at least with my account. The first one is if I accept a best offer and they don't pay for it, my item is still available for other people to come in and buy. I don't want to wait. I don't think that's the best way to handle it, but if that's what's going to happen, at least my item is still available. After 4 days, and it hasn't been consistent for me, but usually eBay will cancel it, and then I can relist my item, or the buyer just goes away. And then for me, I block those people. If they haven't been communicating with me and there wasn't something else that happened that was beyond their control, but I just get rid of those people. I block them and I don't do business with them again. But more and more, eBay is getting this fixed. They haven't done it quite like most of us want to do, but they are moving in the right direction. Do I need to treat this like a real business? Boy, there's a lot of opinions about this. So I'm going to give you mine. If you are selling things regularly with the intention of making a profit, it is a business. The government considers it a business, so I consider it a business. And at that point, I am going to treat it like a business. If I'm just doing a garage sale 2 or 3 times a year, I wouldn't consider it a business, but the government might. They're still going to want you to pay taxes. I treat it like a business because my intention is to make money and to do so regularly. So that is a business. My business does not need to look like your business in order for it to be a business. And vice versa, your business doesn't have to look like mine. For example, I would never want to do drop shipping, ever. And it's not just a money thing. It's that I would get absolutely no joy out of that business for me. That doesn't mean people that are drop shipping and doing so successfully aren't in a business. It just doesn't look like one I want. So I do mostly one-off with a lot of bulk buys that I don't talk a lot about, but I have a lot of items that, I've got thousands of them. But it's a business because I work on it every day and I ship every day. And I've kept the parts of the business, the sourcing that I want to do and that Melody and I love to do as a primary component of our business, but it's a business. So if you're going to do it to make money, it's a business. Treat it like a business. Have policies in place that make it function like a business. Treat your customers like customers and do those things that keep the business the way that you want it. Here's my only caveat for having this be a business. You need to know exactly why you want to have this business. Too often, I see people create businesses that they have to build their life around. I don't want that. We have created a life that our business is built around. Our business fits our life, not vice versa. But you decide what's best for you, and yeah, it's a real business. Should I get a separate bank account for my eBay business? And I say yes. If it's going to be a business for you, absolutely. Get your own account. Separate all of the business stuff that is absolutely possible into its own account. It will make everything easier in the long run. If you ever decide to get a bookkeeper, easier. If you ever decide to do your own taxes, easier. Every step of the way is easier if you keep these two things separate. So we have a separate bank account just for our business, and it really does make the whole process much easier for us. Which leads right into the next question is, do you need a tax professional or an accountant or a bookkeeper? And the reality of it is a lot of those people, they save you more money than they cost, and they keep you out of trouble, and they make sure you're doing things right all the time. One of the things an accountant or bookkeeper can do for you that sometimes you can get lost in the weeds and miss yourself, and that's are you actually making a profit? They can kind of break it down for you and tell you, like, hey, at the end of the quarter, this is where you were at. You've made about this much money, because it's typically less than what you see. It isn't an Instagram post where someone says, we made $100,000 last year. I'm a six-figure seller. Well, you might be, but that doesn't mean you're a six-figure profiter. So a bookkeeper or tax professional can really help you know exactly where you're at. Do I need a business license or an LLC to sell on eBay? That's a two-part answer. First, you don't need it to sell on eBay. They don't care. In Texas, I have a sole proprietorship. I've had it for a long time, and it works fine for us. Lots of people can't do the same thing I'm doing because they live in a different state or they're in a different locale, and there's different laws and rules. That's one of the reasons a tax professional or bookkeeper is so important, because that's their job. That's what they do. And they can make sure that you're legal with what you're trying to do. Not complicated on eBay's end. No, they don't care. But they also don't care if you're legal in your state. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with them. So you make sure that you talk to somebody who actually knows, and not some guy on YouTube who you live in Montana. I don't have a clue what your rules are. It's not just Montana. I don't know anybody else's rules. Do you need those things? Not for eBay, but you may very well need those things where you live at. Here are some questions that maybe aren't as common on my beginner videos, but I think they're really, really important. What do I do if I'm getting overwhelmed? At times in our life, whether it's reselling on eBay or just anything, there are times in our life we get overwhelmed. If the business is built in such a way that it's creating a lot of undue stress, you just can't keep up with the processes that are necessary to keep this business running, then you've built a business that doesn't match what your life can do. Like for us, we love the sourcing and listing individual items, and we make decent money doing that. If I were 30 years old and not closer to 60, and I'm trying to build a business to support a whole family and build a retirement and things like that, I'm going to probably do something that's more scalable. I'm probably going to have a different looking business than what I have today. So the first thing you do is you make sure that you've built your business to match what you can do. So if you're overwhelmed, take a step back and evaluate what you're doing and remember why you got into this. Most people that are wanting to run their own business, there is something that they're seeking. Make sure that what you're doing brings that to you. If you're feeling overwhelmed all the time, there's a disconnect between what you needed and what you've built, which creates you having to do things that you can't sustain. And if that's the case, take a step back, reevaluate, and change course to something that matches your life better and what your needs are better. Is it okay to change what I sell later? Absolutely. Absolutely. The original name of my eBay store was Old School Woodworks. I sold lumber off my lumber mill, and I bought tools, and it was all lumber stuff, all woodworking stuff. That was it. That is all I used it for. And once Melody got involved, I've told the story before, she bought pallets of wiglets and jewelry, and now we sell everything. So absolutely, I don't have my store broken down into different categories. I use one store for everything, and so you can absolutely change what you're selling later on. We do have two stores. That just come up sometimes. People find the one that I don't really sell anything of because I have one for merch. I made one so that it doesn't have a store account. It makes my videos a little easier for me to compare a store versus a non-store, and I don't ever try to sell my merch. But my main store is the one that typically when I'm talking about what we're selling, it's the one I've had since '99. What if I don't have space to store inventory, depending upon your specific situation? I've talked to a lot of young people that are selling out of their dorm room in order to help pay for college. They're not going to be able to have an alphanumeric tub system with 70 tubs. They don't have room for it. But they could probably sell Pokemon cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or stamps or something else that they are specifically interested in. Probably could sell something, even Hot Wheels and things that they could have hundreds of. Some people rent storage space. But see, that wouldn't work for Melody and I. I live so far from town that it would be an hour round trip to the closest storage facility to me. So whatever we store, we have to store on our property. If you don't have space, make sure that, first of all, it's well organized and that you put your things away as soon as you list them so that you can find them when you need them. Make sure that you keep the size of what you're buying that it fits the inventory space that you have. There are tons of small things that you can sell that would fit in small spaces. Jewelry would be a great example that you could store a whole bunch of it in just a little bit of storage. So make sure that your inventory matches your space that you have. And before you go out and start renting stuff, remember you're adding to your cost of what the business is. And then probably most importantly, don't overbuy. That was a mistake we made at the beginning. I love buying. We bought all kinds of stuff, and we still buy a lot, but now we buy it knowing, hey, we're keeping this, this, and this. The rest of it, we're going to find a way to get rid of as fast as possible. How do I deal with lowball offers? I don't turn a minimum on my offers, so I get some lowball offers. You know, I might have something listed for $500, and I get a $12 offer. That's okay. I use those as a chance for me to go look at the feedback that they leave other people. So I'm not angry. I can weed out people that are actually using feedback like a weapon and never do business with them. Typically what I'll do, if it's somebody that's just a normal person and they're trying to get it cheap, I just counter at a price that I can live with. And if I counter with my lowest offer, I normally will put that in the message that I send them. Hey, this is as low as I'm going right now. Usually I never hear back from them. For me, the offers are a tremendous tool for me to check the feedback that they leave. Outside of that, I do make some sales from countering offers, but it's not a high percentage. But just being able to peek into their world before we do business with them, it's worth it for me for that. Can I do this part-time? Absolutely. Melody and I are not full-time sellers. We have lots of weeks that we work full-time, but we take care of our parents, and that is becoming a full-time job. We also do YouTube, which has truly pulled me away from eBay. And there's not a reason in the world that you can't do this part-time. In fact, I think that especially if you don't have super, super strong processes and you're not scaling where you've got other people taking over things, yeah, part-time might be easier. You might have less burnout when you're doing this in chunks that you control and that you just make sure that you're meeting the needs of your customers and your own personal needs. So I think for us, even though I don't make near as much on YouTube as I did on eBay, being part-time on eBay actually fits us a little better. Can you do it part-time? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great part-time gig. Great part-time gig. What happens if I make a mistake? Well, here's the short of it. You're going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes all the time. Most of my videos where I'm telling people what to do, it's because I made that mistake. So I'm never coming to you from a place of, oh, I don't do that. I do that stuff. I make the biggest mistakes ever. Not too long ago, I got a return request from a guy from a pair of shoes. These were nice shoes. I was like, wow, why are... And he sent me a picture. I sent him 2 right shoes. I sent him 2 right shoes. I wasn't paying attention. That guy was super nice. So what do you do if you make a mistake? You fix it. I refund him. And if there's 2 right shoes, I don't even want them back on him. I'm like, keep them. Here's your money back. You know, but whatever I got to do, I'm going to fix it. I hope that if I ever get a negative that sticks on my account, I hope it's something like that. I hope it's something I just earned where because my comment on there will be, yeah, this person's upset and they should be. I just messed it up. So are you going to make mistakes? You're going to make mistakes. I hope you don't. I hope you never make a mistake. Do I think you're going to make a mistake? I think you're going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes. My friends that also sell on this platform, they make mistakes. And you know what? Man, we're not perfect. Just own it. Move on. Take care of your customer. And that's life. You'll learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. So, you know, just take care of it. Learn from your mistakes. Like, I haven't listed a pair of shoes yet that I don't check, that I make sure I've got a left and a right and that they're the same size. So, you know, fix the problem and fix the process that created the problem. All right, so whether you are just dipping your toes into eBay or whether or not you're looking at this as a full-time gig, the reality of it is a lot of these questions, other people have the same questions that you do. I still try to answer every single question that somebody posts on my YouTube channel. So every day I go through and I try to answer all the questions. The only ones that I don't respond to at all are trolls, those kind of things. I don't have time for that. But I spend a couple of hours a day trying to answer those questions. And I know my friends that also create these videos, because they answered my questions, they're really good about answering the questions. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to hop onto Instagram and shoot somebody a note and talk to a couple of people, talk to a few people. But take those questions and get started. You'll answer more of these questions by just listing a few items and selling a few items than you will from watching 100 videos. That's it for this one. I hope it was helpful. I appreciate you watching. I'm going to see you real soon on the next one. Bye.